So good morning and welcome to NEC's Unlocking the Full Potential of Learning During the New Normal and Beyond session. This session will focus on backup and recover solutions. My name is Jennifer Elting. I'm the events manager for NEC and I will be hosting today's session. You've probably been on some other Zoom calls today, but just in case, I want to make sure that you're aware that all lines have been muted, but we want the session to be interactive. So please feel free to add questions in the chat, which is at the bottom toolbar, or unmute your line and ask us a question once we come to a stopping point. Also, let us know how you're feeling about the presentation and demo by using the reactions feature. That's also located on the toolbar in the bottom of your screen. And the secret password for NEC's booth is BLUE, B-L-U-E. So you'll need that to enter for the various door prizes that are being offered. As I mentioned, today's session is being recorded, and we'd be happy to send you the recording link after the close of the event. Now, I'd like to turn things over to today's presenter, Mike Mitch, NEC's Sales Director, Cloud Services. Mike?
Hey, Jennifer, thanks so much, and thanks everybody for the opportunity to present to the R10 organization today. Can you hear me okay? I just want to make sure to do an audio check.
You sound good. Thanks, Mike.
Awesome. All right, everyone. We've got about 45 minutes. This is a pretty interactive session. And as what Jennifer mentioned, what we want to do is try to get a little bit of feedback. We didn't want to do polling, but what we did want to do is make sure that if we've got some questions that we ask, if you guys can give us either that thumbs up or that thumbs down on the yes, no, we'll try to keep it binary and pretty even from that standpoint. But can I see a couple come across the screen just so that I am seeing this correctly? Hold on here.
You'll see those pop up on each individual person's icon on your attendees ribbon is where you'll see that.
Got it. Okay, there we go. Now I just wanted to make sure I got that piece in place. Thanks, Jeremy. I got it.
And there's no thumbs down, so you might just get a lot of thumbs up, which is well played on your part.
Got to do it both, you know, be equal from that standpoint. All right, so what we're going to talk about today is what NEC's backup and recover is, but what we felt was really important is to try to educate the education market a little bit on what's going on in the market specific to education and the reasons for backup in the education space. So we're going to cover the state of the market. We'll talk about some of the latest threats and some of the vectors that are coming in. I'm going to actually deep dive into the Verizon Threat Assessment Report, which actually has a very good chapter specifically on education. So I'm going to share some of that data with you to get an understanding of what's going on in the market, what you should be looking at, what your peers in other parts of the countries are experiencing from that standpoint. We'll talk a little bit about some of the recent attacks that have taken place just this quarter. And then what's behind that? Why is that happening from that standpoint? And then hopefully from the provide solution aspect, we're going to position the NEC Univerge Blue Backup Recover as an alternative or an opportunity or a solution for you to look at for ways to try to address some of the issues and the complexity that's taken place in the market right now. And then last but not least, we'll talk a little bit about our proof of concept that we've put together specific to the education marketplace and what the value of that is in terms of a no obligation type of engagement and what kind of value you could get out of that at the end of this. So we'll try to keep this as interactive as possible. I've got a lot of screens going on, as you can see probably off of my glasses. So I'm going to try to keep it organized. But Jeremy and Jen, if there's some questions and things coming up, feel free to interrupt me and get me back on track. So let's get started here. So the challenge that we're seeing is that last year alone, there were a lot of new types of ransomware, other types of penetration that's taken place into the business across across the industry. It doesn't just affect education, although education does have some specific characteristics that's associated with it. But the key part of the message here today is that the sophistication and the users, many of which are probably your students in some ways or form, which are just testing the system. And in fact, there actually is a category for that, of people that are going ahead and trying to get into the systems. And it's getting more sophisticated. There's a lot of different reasons for this. And sometimes it's a one person trying to use a tool to get, hold a company ransom, or they're just doing it for the sake of saying, hey, I did it from that standpoint. So you got a wide ranging way that they can use these different types of tools, which again, some of them have come up with the technology on their own, but you can essentially now go ahead and buy ransomware as a service, which is just a wild concept. So the sophistication is getting much better for each one of the tools to be able to get in. But it's not only just that, it's more widespread that you have a lot more people that have access to the tools that can use it against you from that standpoint. So it's becoming very, very difficult in many of the industries out there to stop the attack from occurring in the front side. And what we're seeing is making sure your best defense is having a good backup strategy in place, because it's not a question if, it's almost impossible to stop it on the front side. So make sure you got the right defense in protecting your data behind the scenes, even though if someone does get through. So what we did is we've been tracking the Verizon report. We have this available. You can download it. You can see the link here. It's a great report. It's across the industries. There's 20 different industries that are tracked. And education, ironically enough, because of the different type of people that are in the education system, they rank pretty high. The education market ranks pretty high in terms of attacks. And across all 20 for phishing attacks, it was #1. And you could argue that, again, you got a lot of people that are in education. You want to, the more that you restrict it, the more you impact the education aspect of it. So email, web surfing, not knowing exactly what they were clicking on from that standpoint is really the top levels of, how people are getting into the education system and then, creating havoc. Another key one is for malware. So once you get into the phishing attack aspect of it, the ability for malware to be inserted into the environment is pretty high from that standpoint. So again, education across all of them for phishing attacks and malware, #1 across all of the different industries on the attacks. In terms of the organizations, on a priority basis, because you guys don't have that much money, you'll follow the money kind of situation. 6th highest in terms of organizations, and 7th highest in terms of industry incidents. So again, it's one of these things that because of the sophistication, the types of technology, the people now working at home with more time on the computers from that standpoint, it's actually accelerating in terms of growth, not decelerating from that standpoint. So if you look across specifically education, here you can see in last year, and we'll get the new report around February, so we'd be happy to do another one of the sessions with you to kind of recap it, but there were 382 incidents. Of those incidents that were reported, 99 confirmed data disclosure information. You can see the top 3 patterns being miscellaneous errors. Some people didn't know that they were doing it. Some people knew that they were doing it. It's coming in from that standpoint. So top 3 patterns, again, miscellaneous errors, web attacks, and a lot of other different areas. So those 2 attack vectors being the top ones there. Again, miscellaneous errors and web attacks. Threat actors, very interesting, really polarized here. Very large percentage of them external. I just did this for another client recently, and they asked, well, what's the difference between external and internal, and would a student be considered to be internal or external? Students are external, so it's coming from the external piece. That's the majority. What's alarming to a certain extent was the internal portion. Internal portion of people that have access to data that work in, they have user rights to some level. So a large percentage of the threat actors came from within the organization, which is a concern. That's a high concern on just overall security and making sure you've got multiple people that don't have just access to one, you've got 2 levels of authority to be able to get access to the data. And a lot of this is just internal policies and procedures. So really challenging here that the external portion was almost the same as the amount of the internal portion. And then you can see it just drops off, right, to 2% in the other areas from that standpoint. It is interesting to me that in the actor's motivation, financial, follow the money is always typically one of the largest ones. That's a real challenge with the school systems to some extent to do that, obviously. But, in the financial market, that's where people are really going after it because they have a lot of money. Espionage was really interesting to me that actually popped up. I'd love to see if that's coming across from foreign governments or it's coming across the border. but espionage to me is just, that's kind of an interesting one. The 4%, for fun, you know, these are the students and the people that want to get in, right? Maybe one of the students got a bad feeling with one of the teachers. I don't know, grudges that are in there from that, or, you know, ideology, right? The breaches in that kind of space. So it was interesting to see the motives. The one that was most interesting to me was espionage, because I was like, I hadn't seen that pop up on some of the other ones along those lines. And then as far as the type of data that was compromised, personal data, obviously credentials, almost the same from that standpoint. And then also trying to get access to other internal information, maybe the report cards, and trying to change them from that standpoint. If you look at it across the mix, it's kind of an interesting chart here that, again, on what those types of breaches were, lost and stolen, cyber espionage, still in the low area, miscellaneous errors, the high one. You know, it's hard to be able to train all of the students and the users from that standpoint on not clicking on those emails and those web applications. You know, there are students, or some of these people, first time they're using computers along those lines, and it just gets in there from that stance. So interesting summary. And again, if you're interested in getting more detail on the breakout on this, I'll let the team go ahead and you know, work through our team members, and we'll be happy to try to share some of that information with you in the back, you know, part of it. And again, this is from the Verizon 2019 data breach piece. As far as recent attacks that have just taken place back in September with Hartford schools, you know, they were forced to, you know, to stop Fairfax County with Maze ransomware. And a lot of this is happening, as I mentioned, we went back and started looking to some of these because this is 2020, they don't show up in the statistics that I just showed, but it's happening from the standpoint that there's a lot more sophistication and also more automation that's in place that allows this to happen. Again, sometimes you can get one person that wants to get in and they're doing it, but a lot of these people are getting smarter and they're going out and using a web service and getting it to scale out and just keep it going, right? So it's there, that code's just constantly running, trying to get in. I think one of the interesting statistics that we also ran up against is that the moment a internet address is presented on the network, within 1 minute, it is attempted to be breached between 12 to 15 times within a minute of a new internet address getting put online. And that's kind of like what you see happening, you know, when you go to a web browser, you select a website, and then all of a sudden an advertisement happens. There's things behind the scenes that the hackers can use to be able to get in, to be able to take advantage of that. So a lot of challenges for the, you know, for across the industry and schools specifically. But now you go in there and say, why? Well, we work with Commvault. Commvault is the leading, the #1 backup software that's in the industry. It goes back to AT&T Labs. It's a public company. We've been using it to deliver services. So we work with Commvault to run a survey, and of the survey of 1,000 IT organizations, managers, the majority of them, you know, 57%, which you can say majority is just over the halfway mark, said they had a backup solution in place, which is a red flag in itself, because that means that almost half of the IT team out there does not have a backup solution in place. I mean, I'm running it against a lot of companies today where they stick a USB stick into the machine and then they copy it manually, their data over, and they think that's a backup solution. And it's not, because the USB stick's on the system, it's going to get hacked, and then you still don't have your data from that standpoint. So large percentage of people out there are not doing the backups. And of the ones that are doing it, they couldn't get all their data back. A good case in point, I'm doing another webinar after this very shortly on Salesforce. Salesforce, you know, they're a big SaaS provider, the largest one in the industry. 2 months ago, they announced that they stopped all backups. They are not doing backups for their customers. It's the customer's responsibility to do the backups. And here's a huge SaaS provider coming back saying, I'm not doing it. The reason they said that is they could not guarantee they could restore all the data. It's sophisticated. Doing backups is, to a certain extent, a science. You got to follow, you have to be disciplined, you got to be able to do it. So if you're doing backups, you can't get your data, what good is it from that standpoint? Another key thing here on the ransomware, of the ones that were doing the backup, they were confident that their backup could do it, but it was a lot of these backups that they're using, the second system is just a replication of the first one. A shared drive in Azure is not a backup. It's going to get to it from that standpoint. So we see that happening quite a bit, is that even the ones that felt that they could get their data, less than half of the people could actually get their data running from that standpoint. So in general, there's a big discrepancy in the resource and the ability to go ahead and make sure backups are being done the right way to protect yourself from that standpoint. So this is a good spot to do some Q&A. And I guess what I'd like to see is, have any of the team, members here, experienced, and I guess a thumbs up would be a bad thing to say, but if you've experienced some sort of a breach, in your organization, if you can give us a thumbs down, that would probably be the best way to do it across there. And I'll try to see if I can see it. Anything coming across, Jeremy, that you can see? Gotcha. Yep, a couple of them can see it from that standpoint. Okay. All right, so let's talk about what NEC backup is, Univerge Blue Backup. So we consider this to be a best-in-class managed service. This is not an appliance, much like what we run up against with third parties that sell, they say that they're in the backup business, but they ship you an appliance, and then you're still responsible for everything that's done there. You can't call them for support. So we're providing it as a managed service, and we're doing it with using the best-in-class software, as I mentioned, Commvault. We're using our own infrastructure to do that, so we know how to build it and how to operate it better than anyone else. And then we're doing the auditing and the compliance aspects for it. And then on the data protection aspect, what we're doing to ensure that the data is protected is we're using best practices like the 3-2-1 rule, right? 3 copies of data on 2 different types of media, 1 offline and offsite. We are very strict about doing that and making sure that that data cannot get hacked. Yesterday, we had a situation with one of our customers where about 3 weeks ago, someone got into the system and deleted 57,000 files. Just deleted them, got rid of the system. We were able within 15 minutes to be able to get all that data back for them. So we're not quite sure what happened during that process, but it really didn't matter because they were able to get it back. Nobody could get to that data because it was not online. It's part of the backup and it's part of the service from that standpoint. We're also doing the right things for ensuring that data is encrypted, whether it be in transit, and then even after it's we've received it, we do another set of encryption to it so it cannot be exposed. We can't see the data. We can help the customers get it back, but again, we can't see it from that standpoint. It's fully encrypted. And then in the event that customers do have a situation where something's happened, we're offering what we call a restoration sandbox to be able to restore the data in an environment that cannot contaminate others. Kind of like put it into a secure facility and bringing it back up so we can look at it if there's certain things that did take place and the customer wants it along those lines, so we can do that. So it's, again, fully managed service, data protection, and with the restoration sandbox and the recovery portions, we can offer the disaster recovery as an option just by simply doing the backups. Now, why NEC? As I mentioned, we're utilizing our own technology to do that. That puts us in a strategic advantage from 2 standpoints. One, it gives us a cost advantage because we're using our own infrastructure to do it, much like what you'll find the big cloud service providers doing. And secondly, we know how to run it and operate it. That's a lot of work that an organization doesn't really need to do to be able to try to keep, being productive from that standpoint. So we run it on our own infrastructure. We store it in highly regulated data centers that are known for storing data. And they're known for keeping data secure from the standpoint of using chain of custody. In other words, who had access to it? Much like, if you went into a police department and they were storing evidence, who touched the evidence, right? We use Iron Mountain to be able to store the data in the data centers. They actually do the service on the systems and they provide us the access rights on who went and had access to the physical equipment. So no one can just walk by with a USB stick. And we actually use their security cleared maintenance staff to operate the system. So running our own infrastructure, that's what we have. We are using a highly regulated facility to be able to manage that. We're using the Commvault platform, again, which is the #1 backup software in the industry. And just as a side note, Commvault gives us, with the agents that we get constantly updates, the anomaly detection. So we find as a part of the service, we're not saying that we're doing ransomware protection. But what we are saying is that if we see an anomaly that's coming out because Commvault updated, they're watching all of these different ransomware and the different types of hacks that are going on. If that happens with them, we go ahead and we'll alert you that this is going on. We stop the backup, and then we work to make sure, because it's a managed service. We're not just giving the alert and you got to go deal with it. We'll say, hey, what's going on? How can we help you with that from that standpoint? So using the Commvault platform is, these are kind of our triple crown scenario here with those three. We've got multiple clients, from customers that host Home Depot to federal system integrators that are hosting the Department of Homeland Security, to carriers across the country from this standpoint. It's important to understand that we've been delivering this service for almost 10 years in Iron Mountain through some of our government clients that purchased the NEC Hydra store and put it in a highly regulated area. Through that, Iron Mountain came back to NEC and said, hey, can you offer this type of service to our other clients? So we have been doing it for Iron Mountain and to some of their customers to make sure that we're bringing them into the Iron Mountain data center as paper starts to go away and the paper trail platform does. So architecturally, what you got in a customer environment is you have the traditional clients. I know that in the education, we're working with a number of school districts in Florida and the middle, across the US. A lot of them are using Office 365. Some of the clients on-prem. We are on the offsite environment, disconnected. It's not replication, right? It's doing backup technology from that standpoint. But essentially what we can do is we can back up from Office 365 or any of the systems that are on any other of the client systems into the offsite environment. We can also back up all of the servers, and there's different types of servers. It's important to understand that. I know I've worked with some school systems that are using Oracle, and they have a certain, there's other ones that are using some special education applications out there. Using the Commvault platform, we can back up everything. And that's what you want to do, is you don't want to have different retention policies and different backup systems for different platforms. You want a common platform that you can standardize and ensure that everything's being backed up in the same retention policy. We can do network storage, and in certain instances, we can offer a virtual or a physical backup server that can also be done at the local location. And then it's also doing backup and deduplication to the offsite environment. And then once that's done, we can offer the recover services. So we can essentially bring back, whether it be all the clients or any of the servers and the applications in the client's environment to a production state in the offsite environment. Now the agents, as I mentioned, just to recap, they can back up data locally or to the off-prem directly. So we can go directly from Office 365 with SharePoint, with OneDrive, any of that data we can get in and have it stored for as long as you want. Another one of the nice things that we can do is, because we know school systems have long retention policies, is that we can move the data that is in the recover services space. We can actually push that to tape. If you already have a contract with Iron Mountain that you may have been using tape to store long-term data, because we know schools, some of the school districts that we're working with, specifically in the Southeast, they have 20-year retention policies. They've got to keep the data for 20 years. They don't want to keep it on spinning disk. They want to keep it on tape. And they had it on tape with Iron Mountain. They can keep it with Iron Mountain on the tape. And then if they need it, we actually do that as part of the restoration service. So we can bring it back in for them along with it from that standpoint. Another reason why we chose to work with Iron Mountain for long-term data retention. And then on the local backup server that's in place, that can be either physical or virtual. Depends on how big and how much data and what your retention policies and your recovery point objective and recovery time objective are. So sometimes we will put an NEC appliance in if it's large, very large, maybe 20, 30 terabytes, if that's what you want to have locally. Or we just use it as a part of your existing virtual machine infrastructure, make it virtual, and use that as a landing zone and then be able to deduplicate. Key concepts here is that we can deduplicate all the data that you see on the on-prem environment, and we can then, once it's stored with us in the off-prem environment, we actually dedupe it again. So we're doing multiple levels of deduplication. And one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is that, because it's using NEC deduplication technology, is we only charge on what is deduplicated after the fact, not what you think you have in the front end. It's what actually gets done in the back end. And that's what's really nice to see as a part of the proof of concept. You can actually see what that deduplication ratio is and then know that you're only paying for that. Lots of our competitors are out there. They just want to charge you for what you think you have in the front end, not what's happening in the back end. So we're very transparent about that. So some of the features and benefits of the platform, Encryption, as I mentioned, end-to-end while it's transmitting and at rest. What we do on the compression, the deduplication is, again, we only charge based off of what's deduplicated. But what's also really good about that is it reduces the amount of network bandwidth that you have to be able to get the data off-prem. The initial load can take some time, but once that's done, you don't have to have multiple 1 gig pipes and paying thousands of dollars a month in network charges to be able to get the data off-prem. We're really intelligent about how do we get that data off-prem and not impact performance. We also take all of the notifications. We're providing the notifications on the status, and we're taking the action. That's where a lot of our other guys come down. You got the notification, you got an issue, you have to take that. We're taking that proactive action on our side. And then two other key points here. One is on the data verification. We are also going ahead and making sure that it's an important part of the best practices that even though you did the backup, you need to make sure that you verify that you can actually restore it. Because a lot of times something happened in it. We actually, by standard part of the service, we actually do the verification step at the completion of every backup, and then that's what you get the verification notification back. A lot of the services out there don't do it. And a lot of companies they just did the backup, but they don't make sure that they can actually restore it, that the data's, it's got the right integrity from that standpoint. And then also we're offering the integrated compliance search. So if you did want to find a student that was from 16 years ago, you could actually layer that in. We'll still have the record in the database so that you could actually go back and do that search across it. You don't have to have another piece of software to be able to do it. You can go back and you can look for that information through the compliance search aspect of it as an option. And then last but not least is the backup portal. If you've got IT people that want to do that themselves, they want to know more about probably the most feature-rich portal for their own careers is using Commvault. We're actually staging that. That's under what we call the NEC Univerge Blue Command. We have over 50 levels of authorization from just read-only observation to actually be able to do restores. To look at different reports for different people. So we've got a very feature-rich backup portal with Command that does allow for multiple users to use it for reporting purposes, or if your IT team actually wants to do the restores on their own, we'll let you do it. You don't have to call us to do it. But we make sure that when we blueprint the environment as it goes in, all of that's documented. And that is really important information because if you've got cyber and security insurance, they want to see that. They want to see that you've got who's got access to what level of access, what's in place. We provide all that documentation for the schools that you guys can use for your cybersecurity to be able to show it's, hey, we're doing best practices. We're not just winging this. We've got everything in place from that standpoint. And that ties into the reporting piece with the industry-specific dashboards that can be done for education along those lines. All right. I'm going to stop at this one and then just take some questions. We covered a lot, and I'm trying to stay on because I think we still have about another 5 to 10 minutes. Any questions that are coming up, or Jeremy, team, that the way that you guys want to address it?
We don't have any questions in the chat, but as a reminder, you can enter your question in the chat, or you can unmute your line and talk directly to Mike and team. We would love to talk to you. And as a reminder, the NEC booth password is blue. We have our own little giveaways that we're doing separate from the door prizes. So one of you may win our 60-day free trial of this product that Mike is offering. So good luck to you all. Back to you, Mike.
No problem, Jennifer. Thanks. And back on that evaluation program, we do have an evaluation FAQ and questionnaire that we fill out that kind of outlines what it is. It covers the time period. It also does some interesting things for the schools to help you guys kind of get a better understanding of what you have. We understand what's the landscape. 9 out of 10 times when we talk to a customer, we ask them, I was just on one this morning, they didn't know everything that they had. They're like, I don't know if we still have those servers that we're running, or are we backing them up? It's good to know what you have, because a lot of these typical schools that we're seeing right now, with maybe 500 to 1,000 students, probably producing maybe around 10 terabytes of data, and it's growing now, especially if you're doing the Zoom sessions. That's another big thing. If you're Zoom or you're going ahead meet sessions and you're recording those data as part of the classroom, that's another key part. It is very interesting that the video, all of a sudden, we're starting to see that spike up. We're actually doing a backup for someone that is recording the Zoom sessions as a part of the learning experience. So anyway, getting an understanding of what the landscape is and just how much data you have. Understanding, do you have any pain points? We would like to know that. That is also an important thing for you to have that part of the discussion. And then where is the dividing line? If you want to go forward with the evaluation, what are the requirements for it? And then who's responsible for what part of the responsibility? What's NEC doing? What's the school doing? The IT staff that's there from that standpoint. The kind of the results, which turns into a great benefit back for the schools, are you get a documented landscape. As I mentioned, you know what you have, and it's a snapshot. You get an understanding of what's your retention policy. Are you backing up all the data? Are you keeping it for the time period? Is it offline? What's that retention policy look like that you have across it? What kind of deduplication are you getting? In other words, are you paying for more than you think you should be? If you're using public cloud providers, I'll tell you are, and you should take a look at it and just at least get an understanding, because that's the last thing. Look at it from a budgetary standpoint. This is a great way to go ahead and maybe look for saving some of your OpEx investment dollars. That's a part of the budget in the planning space. Maybe a way for you to free something up kind of moving forward. But what we do see happening with this whole shift with a lot more either online, as well as you guys are being asked to do a lot with a little on the IT side. And the IT staff is typically under a lot of pressure to keep a lot of other things going because it's near term, it's not the backup. And that's kind of one of the reasons for those high statistics that I mentioned earlier on. And with that, I think I might have actually done this 5 minutes early. So Jennifer, I'll stay on for a couple of minutes. And if there's any other questions, I'm happy to, but I'll be happy to give it to the next presenter.
Great. So if you have a question, feel free to unmute your line or enter it into the chat.
Mike, I was just going to ask, this is Jeremy, if you could just one more time elaborate on what you're doing for the 60-day free offering.
Yep, not a problem. So, essentially what we would be doing is we'll send out this evaluation FAQ and a questionnaire. And what we would be doing is we will store, whatever amount of data that they need. We are looking at 1 terabyte of deduplicated storage is provided by us off premise. Typically, we're seeing that on about a 10-to-1. That's almost 10 terabytes of data. So if you want to test it, you can really test it. Video will really consume that. We'll back up to right now 7 systems if they need it from that standpoint, whether it be virtual machines. Virtual machines are typically things like a firewall, things that just run as an application, but they don't store data. We will also store application servers. So if they're running SQL Server on type of some sort of an application server, we'll back up both of them. So they got application and that. And that means that, if you want to go back 7 years and just look at the report card for one specific student, you can do that without having to back up, the whole system that was stored 7 years ago. There's different ways to do it. And that's one of the reasons why we use the Commvault-based platform for that. If you do have a lot of data and you want to use the appliance, what we need is we typically ask for a very small virtual machine that you have in your existing environment to act as that target that you back up the systems to. That way it goes ahead and it does the deduplication and then only sends the deduplicated data back to us for the offsite location from that standpoint. And you put into it the data storage, whatever you want. That's your decision. It's your infrastructure from that standpoint. All we care is that we got a quick landing pad to maybe have even a couple of days or a week of data, backup data. And then you can store with us in the back end for up to a terabyte of deduplicated storage. And before we're saying, okay, now we really need to start looking at this as a contract. The software, we would be looking at it from a Microsoft. They provision a Windows server with the .NET framework. And those are the port requirements. We lock down what communicates between the school and where NEC is, only accepting traffic in and out of those ports from that specific port there. And then if you are going to be doing anything with the platform that, beyond a file server, whatever, VM the administrator privileges from that standpoint so that our backup software can talk to it. We're not logging into it. We don't get at that. It's just to allow the backup software to do the backup pieces from that standpoint. And same thing with the database if you have that.
Yeah, I tell you what, I love the deduplication that we do. I think that really hits home for a lot of education customers that I talk to, just because it shows a cost savings, right? And so you're saying this no obligation trial, you're offering that to everybody that's here today as well?
Correct. I just want to make sure it's coming through from the sales team, right? That we've got, the sales team validates it. This is an important segment. Higher education in general is a big segment for us. We've got a large education is one of our verticals. So we absolutely, we want to support and make sure that you guys are aware of it and, and have a good experience with it.
Good. And so I'll just reiterate then, to procure any of this stuff, any of the technologies that you've seen from NEC today in any of the sessions, we are the sole provider of technology on the Equalis contract. So whether you're in Region 10 or not, doesn't necessarily have to be a Region 10 organization, but they are the lead contract vehicle for Region 10, but they also operate throughout the state of Texas. So you would just really become a member of Equalis via the Region 10 agreement. And whether you're in Mission, Texas, down there in the south, or if you're up here in Duncanville, you can procure these products via that contract at a discounted rate. There's a ceiling price. There's a not to exceed pricing that we've already worked out on the contract. And the beauty of it is, especially for some of you that are the charter schools and some of the smaller schools, you probably have some funds. If you needed to get something, you don't have to go through this long, arduous RFP process. Using the contract vehicle will give you an avenue to procure these licenses without having to go to RFP. It's a compliant, and if you need us to talk you through how it's compliant and make sure that you understand what, that it certainly is a compliant way to purchase a technology via the contract, we can do that. But yeah, it's basically a way for you to avoid that headache of RFP. And, say you're going back to school on January 1st and you need some technology in house, we can do that. So let me know how we can help with that. But yeah, the Equalis contract is going to be key in providing some of these technologies. That was great, Mike. Thanks. That was fantastic.
No, you're very welcome. If there's anything we can do, let us know. Remember also that you get the disaster recovery option out of this too, just by simply doing the backup. And that's also another area to look to try to free up budget dollars for the schools. If there's anything else you guys need, let me know. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. We do also want to mention, as Jeremy alluded to, we had 2 sessions earlier today. So we had a 9 o'clock session that covered our Univerge Blue Connect and Meet solutions, and we did record that session, so we're happy to share that with you. We also had a 10 o'clock session that went over our Equalis contract and relationship. We recorded that session as well and can share that with you. And of course, we recorded this session, so we're happy to share any and all of those with you, as well as the free trial offer. So thank you all for joining us. We hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Sounds good. So I think